Hi guys, Marvin here from LAZADA and today we're going to check out some switch from Kailh. They actually sent me this switch tester. So we have 9 switches in 3 different categories. So we have the Kailh Box switches, the Kailh Speed switches, and of course the Kailh Choc low profile switches. So we're going to talk about all the details with regards to the switches, and we're also going to tear this apart so that we can check the construction, how they are built, and how they differ from each other. With that said, let's get into it. Alright guys, so right here we have the Kailh switch tester. We have 9 different switches here in 3 different categories. So at the bottom we have the Kailh Box switches. At the center we have the Kailh Speed switches. And lastly at the top we have some Kailh Choc switches, or the low profile switches from Kailh. This is just a few switches from Kailh. There are a lot more other versions of their switches, but for this video we'll just focus on these 9 switches here. So now let's check out the specifications of these switches. There are actually a lot of varying information about the specifications of Kailh switches, but for this video, we're going to base all the information from their official website, kailh.com. So the Kailh Box White is clicky and also has a tactile feedback due to the click bar design. We're going to tear all these switches apart later, but for now, we'll just focus more on the specifications. So again, the Kailh Box White is clicky and tactile, and it requires 45 grams plus or minus 15 grams of actuation force. While the Kailh Box Brown is tactile only, which requires 45 plus or minus 10 grams of actuation force. The Kailh Box Red also requires 45 grams plus or minus 10 grams of actuation force, but this one is linear, so it doesn't have any click or tactile bump. All the box switches has a 1.8mm actuation distance with an overall travel of 3.6mm. Moving on to the Kailh Speed switches, right here we have the Kailh Speed Bronze, which is clicky and also has a tactile feedback coming from the click bar mechanism. So the actuation required for this one is 50 plus or 10 grams, and with a shortened travel distance of 3.5mm alongside all the speed switches right here to compete with the speed switches from Cherry MX. And then right here we have the Kailh Speed Copper, which is tactile. It requires 40 plus or minus 10 grams of actuation force. Now for the Kailh Speed Silver, the actuation required for this one is 40 grams plus or minus 10 grams. All of these speed switches has a shortened actuation distance of 1.1mm with an overall travel distance of 3.5mm. These switches are made to compete with Cherry MX speed switches. Moving on to our last set here, we have the Kailh Choc switches, or the low profile switches from Kailh. As you can see, it is significantly shorter than the traditional switch. Later, I will show you guys how these switches are constructed. All these Choc low profile switches requires 50 plus or minus 10 grams of actuation force with an actuation force of 1.5mm and an overall travel distance of 3.0mm. Now that we've already discussed the specifications of the switches, we're now going to tear this apart so that we can check the construction and how they are built, as well as how they differ from each other, especially the Kailh Box switches and the Kailh Choc switches, because they're actually quite different from the traditional Cherry MX switches, which is pretty nice for Kailh to innovate and develop their own switches so that we can have more options. So with that said, let's check out the close-up look of the switches. So first we have the Kailh Box White. As you can see, the shape of the stem is very different from the traditional switch. This one, as per its name, is box because it is made to resist dust and moisture. So when you click the switch, it minimizes the chance of dust and moisture to seep in because there's just a little space in between the stem and the housing. At the bottom, we have the usual 2 pins and a hole for the SMD lighting to pass through. Alright, so here's the bottom housing. We have the click bar mechanism right here. And here we have a green plastic button that activates the switch when it gets in contact with the stem. The stem is designed so that it can block most of the dust and moisture coming from the outside. Now here's a closer look at the click bar mechanism. Unlike the traditional click jacket from the Cherry MX Blue switch, this one uses a metal bar to make the clicking sound. The sound is very different to MX Blue because you'll get two clicks, one when you press the switch and another one when it bounces back. It also doesn't have the usual tactile bump on the stem. The tactile feedback is coming from the actual clicking. Now here's a closer look at how the stem gets in contact with the green plastic button that allows the metal contacts inside the enclosure to activate. Pretty interesting design indeed. And that's about it for the Kailh Box White. Next up, we have the Kailh Box Brown. It has the same design with the Box White, but this one is tactile only and doesn't have a click bar. Looking closer at the stem, we can see here the bump that gives you the tactile feel. It also has some factory logo on it, as you can see here. Here's a closer look at how the tactile bump gets in contact with the plastic button that also activates the switch. I personally like tactile switches because it is relatively quiet while still providing me with enough feedback to know that the switch is already activated. By the way, the spring determines the amount of force required to activate a particular switch and an aspect that you can change or customize on your own depending on your personal preference. Let's say you want a tactile switch but with heavier actuation, then you can just simply replace the spring. Now when it comes to the bottom housing of these box switches, as you can see there are two slots or pillars that help the box stem glide up and down. The whole design makes it hard for dust and moisture to seep in, but it's definitely not waterproof since it only has an IP56 rating. Next up, we have the Kailh Box Red. It also has the same box design and the only difference is that since it is linear, it doesn't have any tactile bump and a click bar mechanism. So the stem just simply glides up and down in linear fashion, making it relatively quiet. Moving on to our next category, we have here the Kailh Speed. This one has the traditional design when it comes to the stem, but has a somehow similar design for the bottom housing with the box switches with a click bar slot, but the switch contacts are bare. Here's a closer look at how the switch works. The Kailh Speed is clicky, so it has the same click bar design here that provides a high-pitched double clicking sound. The stem is linear, so the tactile feedback only comes from the clicky feel. Now, here's a closer look on how the switch contacts works. The stem, once pushed, allows the metal leaf to get in contact and close the circuit. Pretty interesting, right? Now, for the housing, it looks like it is also different from the Kailh Box switches. Next, we have the Kailh Speed Copper, which basically has the same top and bottom housing, except that it doesn't have a click bar mechanism since this is a tactile-only switch. Now, here's a closer look at the stem with a very subtle tactile bump. It also has some factory lube that allows you to slide up and down quite smoothly. The bump really looks subtle, that's why you'll barely feel it actually compared to, let's say, a Cherry MX Brown switch. As per my testing, the bump is on the high side and it's possible to feel the bump before you even actuate the switch, which for me is not very ideal. But you'll only recognize that if you press the switch slowly. Now, here's a closer look at how the switch works. Next, we have the Kailh Speed Silver, which is linear so it doesn't have the click bar mechanism as well as any tactile bump. It has a decently smooth up and down stroke. Now, here's a closer look at how the switch works, and as you can see, the stem doesn't have a tactile bump and also doesn't have a click bar mechanism. Moving on to our last category, we have the Kailh Choc White. And like the Kailh Box White, it is clicky using the same click bar mechanism but has a very different construction and overall design. Tearing this apart reveals the bottom housing with a very interesting switch design here that allows it to be as short as possible. The switch action is the same but in a very compact form factor. The click bar design is also the same as you can see here. The biggest difference is with the stem. It is very short and uses a different standard when it comes to keycap compatibility. This switch, like the Kailh Box White, doesn't have any tactile bump. Now, here's a closer look at how the switch works. As you can see, the contact point of both parts is at the center rather on one side like the box switches. Next, we have the Kailh Choc Brown. This one, like any other brown switch, is tactile only, so it doesn't have any click mechanism and has a tactile bump on the stem. It basically has the same design with the Kailh Choc White minus the click bar. And last but not the least, we have the Kailh Choc Red. It basically has the same characteristics as the Choc Brown, but it doesn't have a tactile bump since this is a linear switch. So if you prefer loud and clicky switch, you have the Kailh Box White, Speed Bronze, and the Choc White if you're looking for a low-profile keyboard. If you prefer a tactile-only switch like me, you have the Kailh Box Brown, Speed Copper, and Choc Brown. And lastly, if you prefer a relatively silent switch, then you can choose from the Kailh Box Red, Speed Silver, and the Choc Red switch. And there you have it guys, thank you for watching. Make sure to check the full article link below. Huge thanks to Kailh for sending the switch tester. I hope you learn a thing or two in this video, and I hope it will help you pick the right switch for your first mechanical keyboard. I'm also planning on making another video like this maybe for Galteron and Cherry MX. So if you're interested in that, make sure to comment it down below so that it can happen. Thank you for watching, subscribe if you like this, and see you next time. Have a great day.